The storm swallowed everything. The mission was over, until Evelyn crawled out of the mud, the intel in her hands. Rain hammered the valley like a drumline, beating the color out of the world. Where the convoy had been 5 minutes ago, there was only churned earth, a jackknife truck, and a brown river that hadn't existed this morning. The bridge upstream had given way under the first barrage. The second barrage had caught the rearmost vehicle mid-turn and tossed it into the flood like a toy. Somewhere in that roll, the shock case had torn free, skidding into the ditch and vanishing beneath a skin of water and reeds. Evelyn found it by feel, not sight, gloved fingers groping along a culvert rim until they clanged on metal. She took a breath that tasted like rust and runoff, plunged her arm shoulder deep, and heaved. The case rose hissingly from the water, slick with mud, heavier than it had any right to be. She hugged it to her chest and slid backward up the bank, boots digging into clay that refused to hold. A shape loomed through rain, Hale, soaked and wide-eyed. "You got it." "I've got it," Evelyn panted. She flipped the latches. One had bent in the tumble. Water beaded along the seal. Ramirez skidded in beside them, knife already out. "Tape!" He tore a strip from a roll and cross-braced the bad latch, then wrapped the seam twice more. Evelyn checked the foam cradle inside. The drive's status diode winked once, stubborn and alive. "Rally echo's gone," Hale said, shouting over thunder. "River ate the road. Radio's all static." "Then echo comes to us," Evelyn replied. "We ride the ground that isn't drowning." She lifted the case and scanned the terrain. The valley wasn't flat. It pretended to be. Water told the truth. It crawled along the lowest seams, fence lines, irrigation cuts, the shallow swales where tractors had drifted over years. She tracked the flow with her eyes, followed it to a service road that ran higher toward an old pumping station. Stone and steel. High ground. Maybe dry power. Maybe a roof. A flare hissed into the sky to the east, blooming red behind the rain. Enemy search teams. The wreck had been loud. Curiosity would be louder. Dogs, if they had them. Quad bikes if the roads held. "Move," Evelyn said. They went single file along the berm, knees bent against the wind. The rain was a wall. It erased prints as soon as they made them, but it also turned every motion into a shout of water. Evelyn kept her pace economical and her breathing low, counting steps between lightning so her brain would have a metronome that wasn't panic. Halfway to the pump house, a sweep of white light knifed through the trees. Evelyn dropped, dragging the case under her body, rain thudding on her helmet. Voices carried on the wind, a language she didn't speak, but fear translates everything. The cadence said, "Fan out." The click that followed said, "Safety's off." They slid into a drainage cut no wider than a bathtub, water up to their shins. The berm hid them from the road, but the flood wanted them gone. Twice, Evelyn's boots lost purchase. Twice, Ramirez's hand hit her pack and steadied her without words. Hale took rear, muzzle canted down to keep water out of the barrel, eyes flicking like a lighthouse. The pump station rose out of the wash like a bunker that had forgotten which war it was built for. Chain link fence on 2 sides, a retaining wall on the third, door shackled with a lock fat with rust. Evelyn knelt, set the case against the wall under the narrow overhang, and tested the door with her shoulder. Solid. She pulled a pry bar from her pack, set it under the hasp, and worked slowly, letting rain hide the scrape of metal. "Dogs," Hale breathed. Evelyn heard it then, the high, excited bark cutting through the storm's low roar. Close. Too close. She braced, levered, felt the hasp groan. Not fast enough. She shifted, slid the bar higher, and eased pressure instead of forcing it. The metal sighed and then surrendered like a stubborn tooth. They slipped inside on a breath. The door clicked shut, and the storm turned to a muffled drum outside thick concrete. Darkness took the room in a single sweep. Evelyn froze, listening. Pumps slept in the corners, hulking shadows with dead gauges. The air smelled of oil and old water. She panned her light once, brief and tight. A stair down to a sump, a catwalk over the main basin, a steel maintenance table, and blessedly a breaker panel older than sin. Ramirez, case on the table. Hale, block the door. Quiet. If they try the handle, we buy seconds, not noise. Evelyn set her light on its lowest lumen and cracked the panel. Inside, dust and the nests of insects that loved warm boxes. She brushed them aside and scanned labels handwritten in pencil 40 years ago. Intake. AUX. House. Praying to old wires? Hale whispered. Praying the sump still drains, Evelyn said. If they flood this valley, that basin becomes a beacon. We either make it drink, or we drown with a very expensive brick. She flipped auxiliary. Somewhere deep below, something coughed and failed. She flipped house. A single strip light flickered, then steadied to a faint, kind yellow. Power? Ramirez asked, surprised. Enough, Evelyn said. She popped the case, checked the drive's diode again, still breathing. She set it near the generator's heatsink to leach moisture, then laid desiccant packets from her kit along the seam. The storm's fists pounded the roof. The door shuddered once as a shoulder tested it from outside. Evelyn looked at the two men, rain still streaming off their gear in steady lines. They think the river buried our proof, she said, voice low and even. They're wrong. We're going to carry it out of this valley. A bark exploded right behind the door. A handler's command snapped. The handle twitched, then turned. Evelyn slid the rifle to her shoulder and spoke like a promise. Stay small. When they come in, we choose the angle and we choose the rain. The pump station door shuddered again. Metal rattled against its frame as boots sloshed outside in the flood. Muffled voices traded sharp orders. The dogs whined, eager, pulling their handlers forward. Evelyn crouched low, rifle steady, the case tucked beneath the maintenance table like a child under blankets. Two outside, Hale whispered from the slit window, voice barely audible. At least, maybe more. Ramirez edged closer, blade drawn, body taut with nervous energy. If they push the door, they will, Evelyn cut in, calm and flat. So we don't let them shape the fight. We do. Lightning flared, painting the concrete chamber white for an instant. In that ghostly flash, Evelyn mapped the room again, the basin's catwalk, the sump below, the narrow stair. She imagined the storm outside, the flood crawling higher against the walls. She imagined the enemy's boots stamping water into ripples. And she imagined angles, always angles. The door handle jerked, metal scraped. The first shove banged like a drum. Evelyn gave a hand signal. Wait. Another slam, louder. Hinges squealed. She nodded once. Now! Hale heaved a steel pipe they had wedged under the door. The resistance vanished, making the enemy stumble inward. Evelyn fired instantly, controlled, 3-round burst, dropping the first man before his boots cleared the threshold. The dog barked wildly, pulling at the leash. Ramirez lunged, one clean motion, blade slicing the line. The animal spun in panic and bolted back into the rain. Handler yanked off balance and shot through the chest by Hale's covering fire. The survivors outside shouted, firing blind into the doorframe. Bullets sparked against the steel, whining into the chamber. Evelyn grabbed the case with one arm, slung it across her back with paracord. We can't stay here. Ramirez's eyes widened. Flood's rising. That's the point, Evelyn said. We let it cover us. They'll search high, not low. She vaulted the catwalk, boots clanging against steel grating, and dropped into the sump. Cold water bit instantly, waist deep and rising. Hale and Ramirez followed without hesitation, their gear hissing under the downpour leaking through the concrete. Evelyn pushed forward, wading through black water until her hands found the drainage grate at the far end. It was half rusted, half cemented shut. She wedged the pry bar again, gritting her teeth. Muscles burned. The grate shrieked and then tore loose, coughing a gush of storm water into the dark. They squeezed through into the culvert beyond, water slamming against their legs. The tunnel was narrow, lit only by lightning spilling through storm drains above. The sound of pursuit echoed faintly, boots pounding, shouts garbled by rain. "They'll track us," Hale said, voice tight. "They'll try," Evelyn replied. She pushed onward, her breath harsh in the wet dark. The case thumped against her spine with every step, its weight both anchor and compass. The culvert forked. Evelyn hesitated only a moment, then chose the left path. The flow was stronger there, water tugging like a guide. They trudged, half swimming, until a faint glow appeared ahead. A grate high on the wall, city lights bleeding through. Civilization. Evelyn pressed against the ladder, slick rungs under her hands. She looked back at her team, eyes sharp under dripping lashes. "We come up quiet, blend with the storm. Anyone sees us, we're just shadows in the rain." They climbed one by one, emerging into a deserted street washed silver under the storm. The city beyond hissed with rainfall, neon lights blurred into puddles. The safe house was gone. The valley was gone. But the mission, the intel, lived on Evelyn's back. The storm never eased. It pressed down like a living thing, drowning every sound in endless water. Evelyn led the team along the deserted street, boots splashing through puddles that reflected fractured neon. The case thumped against her back, heavier with each block, as if the rain itself wanted to claim it. They ducked into an alley where trash cans overflowed and power lines sparked above. Ramirez checked the corner, wiping water from his eyes. "We need shelter. The drive won't last if it's soaked again." Evelyn scanned the skyline. A warehouse hunched nearby, shutters locked, but its upper windows glowed faintly. She raised a hand, signaling silence. They moved as shadows, hugging the wall, listening for more than they revealed. At the side door, Hale tested the lock. Solid. Evelyn stepped forward, slipping a flat bar from her kit. "Quiet," she whispered. With steady pressure, she eased the latch back, rain masking the soft, metallic groan. The door swung inward, and they vanished into the dark. The warehouse smelled of rust and wet cardboard. Forklifts slumbered under tarps, crates stacked like tombstones. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, pooling on the floor. Evelyn pulled the case forward, setting it gently atop a pallet. She popped the seal, status diode still blinking, fragile as a heartbeat. Relief flickered in her chest. Ramirez crouched beside her. "If Command thought this intel was lost, it means the enemy thinks the same. That gives us time." "Not much," Evelyn said. She adjusted the desiccant packets, her hands quick despite the tremor in her fingers. "Storm's cover won't last forever. Once skies clear, drones fly." Lightning cracked, throwing their shadows tall against the walls. Hale flinched at the echo, then froze. "Voices," he mouthed. They listened, faint, distorted, but real. Enemy patrol, maybe 2 blocks away. Evelyn's jaw clenched. The city wasn't big enough to hide forever. She scanned the warehouse. Above, steel catwalks ran between rafters. She gestured upward. High ground. They'll sweep the floor, not the beams. They climbed silently, rifles slung. The hostages, they weren't here this time, but the intel was a hostage in its own right. They crawled along the catwalk, water dripping from helmets, until they could see the door below. It banged open. 3 enemy scouts slipped inside, flashlights stabbing through the gloom. Their beams skated across crates, puddles, machines, but not high enough. Evelyn lay prone, breath shallow, case strapped tight against her side. One scout paused, muttering. He kicked a crate, pried it open with his rifle. Rain drummed louder on the roof. Evelyn's hand found Hale's shoulder. She shook her head. No shots. Stealth over fire. The patrol circled once, dissatisfied, and left the way they came. The warehouse swallowed silence again. Hale exhaled hard. That was too close. It'll get closer, Evelyn said. She looked toward the far side where a loading bay door stood chained. That's our path. We ghost through before they double back. They descended carefully, boots hitting puddles with muted splashes. Evelyn led them out the bay into a courtyard washed silver by rain. Across the square, neon signs flickered. A bus terminal, deserted, its canopy sheltering rusted vehicles. Evelyn's eyes sharpened. Buses meant engines, batteries, fuel if they were lucky. And buses meant routes, maps etched into metal and paint. Their way out wasn't just on her shoulders. It might be sitting right there, waiting. She adjusted the case and turned to her team. We cross fast, no noise. Once inside, we find something with wheels. Or at least something that tells us where to go. The rain fell harder, as if the storm itself was listening, determined to drown them before they could move. The bus terminal loomed like a skeleton, its canopy rattling under the downpour. Evelyn pushed her squad across the courtyard, boots splashing through water, until they slid inside the shelter of the old station. The place was deserted, long stripped of passengers and order. Rows of rusted buses sat crooked in their stalls, windows broken, vines crawling up their sides. The storm hissed against cracked glass, wind whistling through hollow frames. Evelyn scanned fast. Every second mattered. A maintenance bay at the far end, a row of lockers along the wall, and near the center, a map board streaked with rain and mildew. She moved straight for it. Ramirez followed, wiping at the smeared plastic. Routes are ancient, he muttered. But look, service roads west, cut through the hills. That's where we go, Evelyn said. No rivers, no bridges to collapse, just dirt and time. Hale prowled the perimeter, then hissed. Contact, east side. They're here. Evelyn's eyes snapped to the case, then to her men. Choices, none easy. She grabbed the case, slinging it tight. We draw them away. Hale, Ramirez, you cut left through the lockers with the case if I fall. Don't stop. That intel reaches Echo no matter what. Ramirez stiffened. What about you? I'll be loud, Evelyn said. The first enemy stepped into the terminal, rifle sweeping the shadows. Evelyn was already moving. She splashed deliberately across a puddle, drawing his aim, then fired. One precise shot that dropped him before he could call out. But the others were right behind. Gunfire cracked, muzzle flashes strobing the station. Go! Evelyn roared. Hale and Ramirez sprinted for the lockers, the case between them. Evelyn darted opposite, firing, diving behind a bus. Bullets punched through sheet metal, sparks leaping. She slid across the wet floor, came up on a knee, and put 2 more enemies down. Rain hammered the roof. The storm was her ally, drowning sound, blurring vision. She used it, weaving between shadows, never where the enemy aimed. But numbers pressed in. More boots pounding, more rifles barking. Evelyn's chest heaved, lungs burning. The case was gone from her back now, carried forward. That was the mission. She was the shield. She vaulted onto a bus hood, firing down, scattering 3 men who slipped on wet tile. Lightning cracked, outlining her figure against shattered glass, a silhouette of defiance. The enemies saw her clearly now, and they came. Evelyn smiled grimly. Good. Look at me, not at them. She fired until her magazine clicked dry. Then she drew her sidearm, each shot deliberate, each step backward, buying space. When the pistol, too, fell empty, she drew the knife at her vest. The storm drowned the rest. By the time Hale and Ramirez burst from the far side of the terminal, the map burned in Ramirez's memory and the case strapped to Hale's chest. Evelyn was no longer with them. Gunfire still echoed, but fainter, swallowed by rain and distance. They didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Her last order drove them. The intel reaches echo, no matter what. And somewhere behind them, in the rain-soaked ruin of the bus station, Evelyn Stone kept fighting, dragging the mission forward with every breath, with every drop of defiance, through a storm that refused to let go.